Thank you. Thank you. Okay, the recording is on.
Sure. Thank you, Professor. Thank you again for taking the time out for walking with me on this research. Uh, my independent research was on agile transformation and how are they made and not made using agile assessment tools. We'll evaluate these tools and see the impact that it has on agile transformations taken up by several other companies. So the agenda for our meeting is that this presentation will walk through the introduction, where I would introduce you to the agile assessment tools. We'll take an assumption that we are aware of the agile transformation, but I'll mention it in brief as we go through it. Then I would walk you through the case studies about companies that did not do a fair job with agile transformation and actually understand as to why that may have been the reason. And then in general, we'll understand the industry trend around agile transformations. Then we'll create a hypothesis. We'll walk through as to what that could be. And then talk about a methodology to create a path forward as to how companies can better carry through their agile transformations using agile assessment tools. And eventually, in conclusion, we'll talk about a company who could actually execute a successful agile transformation. There are quite a few examples, but we'll take one example in particular as to how they could use agile assessment tools to their benefit and successfully transform into an agile organization. So far, so good, Professor?
So far, so good.
All right. So let's get started then. So about the agile assessment tools. Now, as we understand, there's a big demand for every organization who would want to adapt to an agile methodology. And as we understand about agile methodology, it is the velocity of delivering a project with multiple changes that occurs. In this case, we are taking this as a definition for an agile. And there are several stages that an organization goes through when it is trying to implement an agile transformation before it actually achieves maturity. So broadly speaking, there are around about 4 stages that an organization undergoes when they are implementing agile transformation. Within these stages can be multiple layers. There's also something known as 11 principles of agile methodology. Namely, so it is focusing, where you prep and warm up the organization to the idea of being agile. You start creating the culture, you start implementing the tool, introducing them to the Scrum, the Kanban methodology, where they start getting adept to it. And then you start upgrading their skills. That is when you enter the delivering phase. And from there on, you start optimizing the entire organizational structure so that they can be ready to go for agile output. And eventually just keep on scaling on it and adapting to the way that agile companies are supposed to work. We'll also talk about how do you evaluate an agile company to be actually successful. Now, with these 4 categories, more so it happens that an organization gets stuck at one. For example, if they may have started at focusing, that's the stage where you are just warming up the company, warming up the entire team to the idea of agile, but you get stuck eventually down the lane. And that could be very much when you're actually optimizing the entire organization. That is when you are redefining the organizational structure so that they can actually do an agile transformation. So more often than not, the teams do not know what to do. And for that, they have agile assessment tools. These tools have categories, the metrics that they gather from the team within, and deliver data-driven insights and help you identify that what kind of areas is there that the company or the team can improve and transition to the next stage of agile transformation. And through this research, one crucial thing I've understood is that as I was starting down first, I always thought that you just need to do agile. I was thinking that the companies do not do not take agile because they have faced other challenges. But in this case, I understand that agile is not a magic bullet. Anybody can be agile, but how they would want to approach it, it's crucial. Professor, do you have a question?
I was going to say, you can say that you're agile. That doesn't make you agile.
Exactly.
And also,
Exactly.
agile is not a digital thing. It's not that you're either agile or you're not. There's
100%.
literally, I think we measured something like 12 or 14 different dimensions to agility that you could be agile in some dimensions and not others. So it's not all or nothing. It's a gradient of sorts, right?
Exactly. And you know what? I went through a very interesting report by BCG. I'll walk you through where there are companies who tell themselves that they are successfully agile, but when you account them for the metrics, you see that there's a great lack. So we'll be eventually coming to that part.
And they don't always succeed as a result. I mean, they
They
do
don't.
commercials and then they realize, well, it's not working, and then they blame agile, but they weren't really fully agile to begin with.
Yes, and I do not want to take the name of the company, but I have been very much in the midst of that chaos where they are trying to push towards that. But there are challenges that they're saying. So if I ask them, so for example, in my internship, when I asked them that, are you agile? Or when my first presentation was that, how can we change into an agile active organization? The response that came along was that they're already agile. So they were not ready to take a survey, the tool that I'm about to propose through this research, to actually, hit the nail on its head and understand that where are there actually areas of improvement, where are there blockades, and actually see the data through. They were not ready to do that. So, okay. So yeah, the final understanding is that agile is not a magic bullet. You just cannot say that you're agile without actually going through its steps and making it unique for itself. Now, these assessment tools have broad categories. There are few assessment tools which are automated, and they streamline data collection, produce reports, and you know what? We all know that tool. It is Jira. So a lot of reports that you see, for example, burn down chart, velocity reports coming from Scrum boards, those all reports help you assess that how your Scrum teams are working. Those data insights that how your stories are processing through the pipeline. That's the automated kind of assessment tool that most of the companies use. And let me be very clear that even these tools just serve very few criterias as to how can you assess that you're actually doing good when it comes to defining an agile transformation. Now, the bucket is comparative analysis. So the comparative assessment tools. So it has a set of in itself where it now there is no one short comparative tool. You often have to do a market research and actually understand that where are you lacking in face of your competition. There are multiple reports, but again, you have to do that manually. But this is sort of an approach as to how can you assess your agility. Now, the second thing is framework specific. It's very straight to say that there's something known as scale agile framework, where you do your where you prioritize based on weighted scale average and see that what task you should be taking first. Same goes about Scrum, Kanban. So these are frameworks, and as we would see through the case study, that a lot of organizations do this very basic stuff where they understand, let's do Scrum and we are agile. That's not the case. And this is what most of the companies are implementing on. So the automated and framework specific are the categories of assessment tools or agile transformation models that are in most existence across industries. Then there are process improvements where you are just modifying the agile processes. So where you switch your agile model from Scrum to Kanban and say that now you'll be successful because you are using the new gimmick in town. So that might not be helpful. It's just you are still neglecting a lot of areas of improvement that might not be covered within either of those methodologies, be it Scrum or Kanban. Now, the best practice. Best practice is the mix of all the worlds. usually less taken, the category or the assessment that is less taken into adherence. Not a lot of companies do that because it is time taking. This is where we provide, this is where the company goes for framework and recommendation that is unique to their agile adoption. So basically, these are the 4 categories as to how an agile model can be assessed. So these are the variants and the purpose of the assessment tools that we have talked about. Now we'll go to the case studies. Before I do you have any questions, Professor? All right. So the first company that we'll take into here as for example is the ING Bank. ING Bank in Netherlands. Now, it is a very recent example. It was around about 2018, 2021 period when ING Bank attempted to push for an agile transformation. And what they wanted to do with the agile transformation, they wanted to do this big bang agile transformation, where they were 2,500 position, which they rejigged with 3,500 of its employees, meaning they reshuffled their entire organizations for newly created positions as per the. And what happened? What happened was, due to this restructuring, they ended up eliminating a lot of traditional roles. They formed many small squads, and this meant a lot of this meant a lean learning curve for a lot of these employees, and for which they were not ready. So what it ended up doing is that it confused and traumatized the staff. There was a lack of people with the right mindset, and eventually the stock price for ING Bank declined by 30%. And not only this, a lot of folks just exited the company. So while it was going through this big bang agile transformation, it lacked the right people, the right mindset, the right skills, and also they were not producing any value that we can understand from the stock price. And it might be very biased to say that, okay, they were not very careful. They were doing big bang agile transformation, and that could have caused them these consequences. But apparently so, there are a few companies who could do this successfully, but they adopted that agile transformation to their own uniqueness. ING did not. They lacked the assessment in making that transformation. Meanwhile, the other company that I'm talking about is Spotify. They did the same thing, but they did it uniquely for their own team. They restructured it, but on several levels that their team was comfortable with. And they could actually deliver results. Meanwhile, ING Bank couldn't. Now talking about Project X. So this is out of the 3 examples that I've taken, this is the second one. So this is a multi-region energy company, which very proactively started to turn into a remote workplace prior to COVID, and pretty much was pushing for this transformation through COVID. So it was its own attempt at being agile. So what they did for that was that they had 2 teams. One was provided for another vendor, the other was provided by vendor 2. Now, there were 4 Scrum team, and this project was designed for an year. And there were 4 Scrum teams, which contained staff which was both co-located, and there was also remote staff. And for 2 of these teams, the Scrum Masters were mostly remote. And as we understand that within Agile, a lot of times we see that a lot of roles are remote. That is not true. So in this case, the Scrum Masters were only on site for approximately once a month. So what did lead it into? A lot of communication gap. A lot of communication gap within the team, the Scrum Master, the leads, and eventually the outcomes. That was the agile transformation going good? No, because their deliverables were now taking 3 times longer than they used to be. It came out to be was 5 times over the budget. So this, we can clearly say that the attempt that they were making at an agile transformation did not fare well. Now the last thing, the Siren Project. Siren Project is the name of the initiative taken up by the Surrey Police Force. And as we understand about bureaucratic organizations, they often have their own way of working, and they usually go a waterfall way, and a lot of their deliverables are, let's say, estimated for a time, let's say 4 to 5 months. And such was the case with the survey police force. So what they wanted to do was again go and make their crime intelligence and custody units agile. Uh, with that intent, when they started it out, not a lot of folks within the team had the experience of agile methodology. Uh, Even though agile can be successful if you have a lot of customer feedback, so did the Surrey police department did, but they did not understand that how would they integrate the technology in their systems. So a lot of developers who were involved with the project were not accounted for. A lot of deliverables that they made never went through or never even passed the test cases. They thought that just by implementing a technology that would make them agile. And what so happened that they did not make a change in this practice, and they ended up, and it ended up them costing around about $15 million in wastage resource. They took 8 years to realize that this is not working for them. And all through this time, what they were having was a scope creep. A lot of planned sprints as part of Agile that you have, tasks that were supposed to be delivered or stories that were supposed to be delivered within Agile, they eventually leaked out more often than not. And that was the accumulation that where they faced those cost consequences and time consequence. So up until this time, this was about the 3 case studies that I've talked about. Now I'll talk about in general the industry trends around agile transformation and assessment tools. Before this, if you have any questions, Professor.
No. This is an excellent job. So keep going.
Sure, Professor. So talking about the industry trends. Now, from the case studies, we are realizing that these were companies with non-tech background, technology background, engineering backgrounds. They were attending to be agile. But there's a trend all across that we can say, and as highlighted here, that the companies who have attempted to go through an agile transformation, 57% of them have had a neutral experience. That is the success rate. And this is assessed based on external consultants who have gone through and actually assessed their agile models. But if you ask them if their agile is successful, there is a BCG report that says that there were 91% of the companies that perceived their agile transformations as successful versus just 38% of these companies actually being successful. And the difference between, so we are categorizing those companies who are actually successful in executing agile transformation as agile companies, and those who are just perceiving them as successful, we're calling them illusory agile companies. And we will broadly categorize them and use that how in metrics are those different. But in general, firstly, we'll talk about what are the industry issues with agile transformation. Now, as mentioned, 57% have a neutral experience. Now, so the key agile practices, the one that we are talking about in common whenever we talk about agile, whenever a company takes on agile, the few things that they do is implementing Scrum, Kanban, and sprint retrospective. They make their organization product specific or product focus. And hereby we can understand there are at least 50% of companies that do so. Then there is continuous integration, as in all the components that are going parallelly, which used to be parallelly followed through in a waterfall model. They start integrating into a common pipeline that dives through an agile transformation. Most of the companies claim to attempt to do that, and that is around about 66% of those. And you keep on monitoring and observe that how are these going. Usually just 50% of the company do that. And the usual challenges when you are adapting to these practices are that you are stuck in a limbo. You are in a waterfall model, and then you're moving towards Scrum. So in this limbo, at least there are 27% of these companies who never get out of. They are always switching back and forth between waterfall and Scrum. And this leads to decreased efficiency, lack of realization, A lot of these companies do not get the right balance of how to prioritize customer needs. But if they at all are able to adopt to the agile model, 70% of them are able to deliver business value. This entire data has been pulled out from KPMG report as to validate that this was a survey that they ran through broad geographies and companies, not engineering specific or not an industry specific and not a region specific. So now talking about, as we were categorizing the agile companies versus illusory agile companies. In this, when we talk about few, so firstly going about, we have categorized based on 4 pillars. As to when you evaluate that how agile transformations can be assessed as successful. One could be the purpose, strategy, and priorities, the governance and funding of the projects within the organization, the tech enablers and data that are pushing through the agile projects, and the performance measurement. So I'll highlight just the few boxes where we are getting a comparison between agile companies and the illusory agile companies. As you can see, the agile embraces or have more iterative cycles versus illusory agile cycles. So in a sense that when you're going through a project, how many times can you iterate? So that defines that how adaptable are you to a change versus the companies who are just claiming that they are agile. So only 38% of the companies that claim that they were actually say that they are iterative compared to the model that they followed before agile. This is one highlight and the difference between illusory agile companies and the agile companies. The other one is the agile companies are far more adaptive to the data platform. So I'm talking about the tech adoption. So when you are not agile, and if you think that being agile makes you tech savvy, it's not so is the case. And this is the point that drives that reason. So there is a higher adoption of data platforms in agile companies that is 68% versus 23%. There's also a higher adoption of DevOps that is 80% in agile companies versus 31% for illusory agile companies. And there's also a higher adoption of modern tools that is 59% versus 13%. It's very fair to say from understanding here why few companies stay legacy and why most of the companies stay legacy and why only few companies are able to skip that bandwagon and actually turn into a technological advanced company. So this is how they adopt to the new technologies in the market if they are at all successful transforming into an agile organization. And this is about it for this part of the key trends. Now, what I'll be walking you through would be hypothesis. Before this, do you have any questions, Professor?
No, usually the hypothesis comes first. So I guess I'm curious what kind of hypothesis you can have after going through all that. But let's take a look. Let's see.
Sure. So understanding firstly the case study and then the general industry trends, there are few scenarios that we can be certain of. That there is a need for agility assessment tools. That there are existing agile assessment tools because a few companies do use it, even if not successfully, but they do have it. And we have to also address the part that these agile assessment tools are having its own set of limitations. So within these broad 3 categories, I would want to address first the need for agile assessment tools, where the agile adoption is widespread. There's no doubts about that. The assessment, as we understand, is also crucial for improvement. But there is a very limited research on tools. Even when I was going through and looking for research papers as how many of them have compared agile assessment tools, and mind you, there are around about 25 to 30. Out of 30 assessment tools, there are 11 assessment tools that you can say are used more often than not. The other ones are less known, do not have good metrics, or do not have a wholesome solution compared to the other 11 or 12 tools that are used across. So, and even within those, it's not a wholesome solution. So there's not a fair enough research that is done on these tools to say that one is better than the other, or how can they be used in one combination or the other to actually deliver a valuable insight to a company who are attempting to go through an agile transformation. Let's not even say attempting, who are even planning to go through an agile transformation. So there's a lack of good research on assessing these tool itself or comparing these tool itself. Now, talking about the tools that are already existing, there are tools and there is a range of tool which has its own focus. There are around about these tools, as per one of the research papers that I was studying, covers around 9 evaluation criteria as to coverage, availability, guidance capability, assessment recording, automated reporting, comparability, different modes of usage, different scopes, and extensibility. So these are the criterias that in general, all of these 11, 12 tools, which were taken into this particular research were considered to see that how often than not are they hitting these 9 criterias. And also a lot of these tools usually have a limited coverage of agile principle. Now they would focus on one principle versus the other. For example, someone would focus just on measuring the depth of a Kanban methodology versus the other one just measuring the depth of the Scrum methodology. I'll be also walking you through each of these tools, how they look and how are they framed. But these are these tools have usually cover these 9 evaluation criteria. And the research paper also talked about that you cannot bank on one tool to cover all of these criteria. And as said, there is not a web tool that actually exists on the net that can tell you that, okay, you are ready for an agile transformation. And there is more emphasis on practices than outcomes. So it's more like if they would want to implement an agile, just they know the practice, but they do not know if it will be beneficial for them or not. Do you have anything, Professor?
Is there any sense of being able to tailor the various practices within Agile to meet the needs of the company, or is it, again, all or nothing?
And that's where the paper would be going, as in the research would be going as to how can actually you introduce customizability to build that uniqueness for your agile transformation. Every industry, every company depends on the kind of work it does, the kind of team it has, the kind of client it works with, and accordingly that defines your agile model. So it can be done using the assessment tools that we currently have, but you'll have to accommodate and make choices based on what works for you best versus not. So it's not one stick solution, if I have to say it like that.
Yeah. But I mean, if you had a comprehensive survey that you could assess an organization with, you can then tailor all of the various agile practices specifically for that organization. And you're saying the tools that are out there can do this or cannot do this?
Cannot do this.
Yeah,
One tool in
you have an
itself
opportunity to create this tool. You have this opportunity.
Yeah, so this is something that I realized when as I told you, that when I saw that hesitant, I kept drilling on it that why is it not being done? Is there any solution? When I came across this research paper where they actually compared each of the tools metric by metric, by question they had, and they were spotting. So to be honest, there were a lot of maths that was involved in it. But the conclusion of it that I could understand is that they were trying to tell you and identify you the problem, but in different directions. So you have to be careful as to what tool are you choosing. You cannot just go with one. You'll have to have a good combination mix of those tools in your bag for you to actually understand that what you need actually when you are.
There's tools and there's practices, and those can be different, right? I mean, you could talk about a practice that has almost nothing to do with a tool.
Yeah, exactly. So it's very vague when it comes to agile. So as I told you, for example, when I told them that we can do better when actually we can be an agile, I was told we are already agile, but there was no substance to that sentence.
Yep.
So
Yes, yeah, what you call the illusory agile, but I mean,
exactly.
I would suspect the vast majority, and I think your research shows the vast majority of companies
Yes.
are pursuing illusory agile, right?
Yes. Yes, Professor. So here we'll talk about an approach. So with the hypothesis that we have that, yes, we understand the value of assessment tools, we also understand that assessments are not a wholesome solution in itself. Then what can we do? So firstly, we'll have to focus on creating a comprehensive tool and not just say that, okay, we'll say that we'll put all together the 11 tools and we'll just use it across. But actually, you'll have to work with the companies to identify that which tool would work, which combination of tools would work for them, and show them, and in a way, try to address all the 9 criterias that we mentioned in the last slide, and actually evaluate them all across. So there is no single tool that meets all those 9 criterias. And the key features that enhance these effectiveness. So if you are able to actually get the results out of this, you'll be able to promote for a wider adoption and collaboration. There would be an effective use at expert levels. Also, you would be able to automate a lot of those reporting that would come to you and be able to assess the changes in real time. And again, it's not, you never stop growing in agile model. You have to keep on improving, you have to keep on integrating. And that's where we talk about extensibility. So if given for that, we create a good mix of these tools, these are the key features that will enhance the effectiveness of an agile model. So just the approach that I talked about, and I would elaborate upon the methodology as to how can we actually go about this approach. Before I go, do you have any questions, Professor?
No, I'm fine.
So we'll talk about the tools that we have been mentioning about for quite some time. I was talking about that even though there are around about 30, 32 agile assessment tools in the market that exist, quite a lot of them is open source, a lot of them are closed source, you'll have to buy those tools. But 11 of those were pretty much outstanding in terms of the kind of information they address in for different principles of agile. So for example, Agile Enterprise Survey. It's a web-based survey, and again, behind a paywall, which is designed by Storm Consulting. It's a firm that deals with analytics for agile assessment. It assesses it, so it has only 16 questions that are categorized into 5 parts. And in this case, no personal info is stored. Then we have a health dashboard that is in a spreadsheet format, and it evaluates basis the number of stories you have completed, what is your team composition, and it is updated after each sprint. And it produces for every sprint that you go through. So it's very, in a sense, nuanced tool compared to other agile tools that we'll be looking at. As in, it would just tell you that how is your sprint doing versus the wider agile principles that you might, or the development areas that you might not be addressing. Then you have Agile Journey Index. It's again in a spreadsheet format. It has 19 questions in 4 categories. Each of these questions you have to score from 1 to 10. And this pretty much tells you that how are you standing in comparison to other agile models. And then you have Agile Process Assessment Tool. This one is what I was most, fascinated with, the Agile Process Assessment Tool. It was developed by Infotech Research Group. This is the research group also that published an evaluation paper on a lot of these Agile assessment tools and made a comparison. So they have 67 questions across 6 categories. So these 6 categories, 4 categories are all what addresses the agile principle, be it a Scrum, be it a Kanban, be it a team dynamics, be it a continuous improvement, all those concepts. And these are just not broad categories. These have very nuanced questions, and then you have nuanced options for any team member to select from, and then you can actually quantify the results. So this is what these dashboards, this is what these assessment tool does. Then agile self-assessment. This is again a tool that has been created by a Cape Project Management. It's based on Scrum. Again, there are other principles that are not addressed by it. And then you have 5-level maturity metrics in it, from strongly disagree to agree. And then you have around about 60 questions as part of this this tool. And there are around about 6 more tools as such, which same thing, but across different areas. The one that I can actually walk you through in this case is the depth of Kanban. This was how is your Kanban board doing? So what we have Scrum board or Kanban board. So it can go in a mix, or it can be either one of these approaches that a company can take. For the most part, what they do is they usually take Scrum. As per the KPMG report, we could see that there are more than 50% of the teams that go for the Scrum methodology versus Kanban. Kanban is on the lower side, but also there are companies who are using a mix of both, but they are very rare. And I would recommend, as I was going through this research, I personally felt that a mix is better than actually being very absolute and myopic about one of these methodologies. So what this tool does is this actually helps you understand that how well your Kanban methodology is doing. It's also a survey, and it generates a spider graph across 7 axes for you to determine that how good is your agility as per the Kanban methodology. Now, given that this broad spectrum of tools that we have, what I had in mind that we'll have to create a customized tool with questions that are pulled in from each of these tools, categorized around different areas, and all of these questions put against a Likert scale. So also this tool would be anonymous. It would have adaptable questions that will be per team level, where what I mean by per team level is the leadership, is the team level, and then is the member level, as in individual level. And the questions will be adapted for per level. For example, when a leader would be answering that survey, the questions would be as per what the leader should be responding for versus a team member in a Scrum team. The questions for him or her would be different than the question would be that be for a leader. And this would be, as mentioned during the hypothesis, that the 9 criteria, it would be concretely addressing those, and the questions will be pulled in across from the existing tools that we have. And all of this, based on a Likert scale, would be aggregated over a radar chart. And the radar chart is on the right side, as you would see that there are different areas that are being addressed here. And I'm not going to say that this is going to be consistent all across the companies. The criterias can be very much changed as per what the company is looking for, or the kind of things that it wants to focus for. So for example, if it wants to focus on product, how can it, where is actually at it when it comes to being a product focused agile team versus from past to present. So for example, at present, it is not a product focused agile team, and whatever its metrics are currently, this tool will help them assess that. And from there on, how can they move on, that they can get to know from this agile tool. Actually, I'll show you the tool itself right now.
By the way, this reminds me quite a bit of the SCI capability maturity model, CMM.
Okay.
But theirs is more on a 1 to 5 scale. Yours is on a 0 to 4. So if you want to draw that correlation a little bit stronger, you can recalibrate. But you may find that the CMM model has agile elements to it. You might want to use that as a benchmark.
Yeah. And I'm always looking for assessment tools or models as such, because they actually, so the framing of the question, Professor, is very important when it comes to these assessment tools,
Right.
because the interpretations, they can be widely different between two people or within even in an organizations.
Yeah.
So I'm always looking.
In general, the CMM and CMMI are focused on assessing the maturity of the process behind the software development in an organization, in a particular organization, at a particular point in time. So, level 1 is ad hoc. Level 5 is quite rigorous and consistent. And then you get everything in between. And it's a pretty thorough assessment methodology. It came out of Carnegie Mellon, and it came out of the US military.
Oh, superb. I would want to look at that.
Well, let me give you a couple of links. One link is, I think you should think about getting this thing published, by the way. So I'm going to put a link here for IEEE TEMS EMR, and then I can find the SCI CMM link while you're finishing up.
Okay, sure. I'll take a look.
It's called the Software Engineering Institute within the Carnegie Mellon University.
Okay, so you're sending a link?
Yeah, it's on the chat box.
Okay, I got it. Yeah, cool. Thank you for this, Professor.
Oh yeah, no, this is. I'm amazed that you didn't. I mean, with all the work you've done, somehow this didn't cross your path. It's amazing how, I mean, it seems like you've worked your way completely around these guys. Now, I will admit that as a software organization, they never totally focused on agility, but they've always focused on maturity, which is all about consistency of output and quality of output, and reproducibility. So those sorts of things that really kind of predated Agile, right?
Yes. And I think that mindset has still been existing as to how do you evaluate Agile. So I think that's the challenge that a lot of folks we are going through when we work in a company, especially a tech company.
Right.
So, yeah. So I was about to show you the tool. This is a very basic concept tool, and it has been taken up from, there's something known as Agile maturity model. But again, it needs to be overhauled as per those 9 criteria and actually develop an assessment tool of our own. So let me share my screen. So here, as you would see, that firstly, as we have talked about the criterias can be changeable. Within these criteria, so these are your criteria. Within those criteria, you have areas. And within those areas, you have options. So for example, as I was saying, that 0 to 4 Likert scale, what we can do is, let's say, impeded would be that your agile model is impeded. Why is it impeded for being agile? Let's say we consider teamwork. Teamwork is not existing, means your team is impeded. If the teamwork is improving, so it's a perspective. So you can just say that you are in transition. If you're, let's say, if you're at least 70% of the ideal situation, you can just say that you're sustainable. If you're 80%, that you can say that your team is in sync, then you can say you are agile. And then if, let's say, between each individual and every other individual on the team, each believes that the other has the necessary skill and has high integrity and wants to help them to succeed and is dependable. So you can just say that you're an ideal stage of agile. Even if I've read through these options, okay, I'm not going to say that this is going to be implemented on all companies wide across. The ideal definition for teamwork would be different for company A versus company B. And now this is where we'll have to create those options for them to respond to, because when I was interviewing people, when I was walking through with them as to, is this question, so 2 people were reading the options and the questions differently. And that's where I understood that there has to be consensus when you're building out an assessment tool as such, where you identify that what interpretation from one particular option they understand. So the broad categories, impeded, in transition, suitable, agile, and ideal, would remain the same, but within them, the options, the interpretations of the options will have to brought upon from the consensus within the organization. So creating a tool for an organization is a task in itself, and it's an opportunity as well as to how can you create those metrics and make them understand that are they doing good enough to be fully agile. So And as you feed the numbers here, the current level and everything, since we have taken 0 to 4, it will generate a radar chart. So whatever survey form, for example, I pass this on to an organization today, and if they fill this out all across, I'll be able to assess that from one quarter to another, how have they been doing. And this is the categories that are currently built on. They can be more, they can be fewer, depending on the need of the company here. So this was a rough tool that I have at hand right now and something that I can elaborate on. And actually, the second stage of this execution would come into a dashboard. This was thanks to a person that I worked at Motorola, who was pretty excited by the idea itself, that we can leverage an existing solution in the market, something known as Beacon dashboard.
Did you say Pekin dashboard?
Yeah, Beacon dashboard.
How do you spell that?
Peakon.
Pecan. Okay. All right. Never heard of it. This is new to me.
Yeah. So Beacon dashboard is a product by Workday. So
Okay.
Workday, what it does is they have a tool which creates surveys with no such purpose and just gathers those information and tells them about the employee sentiments. So the idea was, why not make this focus toward assessing for Agile? So what you can do with this tool is that you can feed them questions and they would separate that data out through metrics. For example, if you'd see here, so we have it a very different categories here, but for an example, engagement, accomplishment, autonomy, and environment. Out of this, I think one that stands for Agile is that how much autonomy you have. This is always one of the questions when you are addressing within the realms of Agile assessment tools. The same can be evaluated using this tool. So you just have to update this tool with the questions, and this would launch out a survey to the wider team, and it would be an anonymous survey. And the team can just take that survey and actually go through it. And what this dashboard would do would aggregate that all data and make a readily representational dashboard for any manager or a leader to look at. So this is like just not one part. You also have a overview part in a Beacon dashboard. I also am still I'm yet to actually do this in execution, because I'm yet to feed this dashboard data and you have to pay for this. So I have not been able to get a good hold of Beacon dashboard even within our organization, since we did not have enough data. We could not feed much to this and actually see that if it works or not. But for the major part, for what the features that I know what it can, I believe it makes sense to feed this tool with our data and see where it takes us. So this can actually automate a lot of part when it comes to creating a customized, wholesome agile assessment tool. So in conclusion, all the case studies that I went through, they were pretty much done using a brute force method. So I took an example of Spotify already. So they are actually considered a classic example when it comes to doing a unique agile transformation. That is listening to their team, listening to their company's products and vision, and actually making an agile adoption that is unique to themselves. Now, a lot of other folks call it a Spotify agile model, and they are actually trying to use it. But the crux of it always stays the same, that you just cannot straight out blanket use that model for your success. So you always have to adopt it to your own need. So in this case, I'm taking an example of William Hill. So this is a company that was established about 80 years ago. It is globally recognized in betting and gaming. It has 3 million active digital customers, but it was facing this constant innovation in a competitive market. So it was seeking out to deliver exceptional customer experience, but these were the challenges that it was facing. Now, how did William Hill wanted to go through his agile transformation? Again, a legacy company trying to make its mark in a new and upcoming market, which is dominated by up and coming young players how would it adapt to this change? Should it just adapt technology? Well, actually could have done so, but what it did was instead partnered with Agile Sparks for guidance. And at different levels, what they did, now here they did not actually just go about and used an agile assessment tools. So this is what the usual method of successful agile transformations look like, where they train a lot of levels at a lot of time. So it's a pretty brute force method, but it's one method that actually someone can stick by, where what they do is they create a personal coaches for managers, scrum masters, and product owners that they have in the team. Within the team, they implement Scrum training. Even that is my team that I've been going through, where they have been training every member about Scrum, but still we have not been successful because the team is too huge. So it will take time, but it will take another good time where you would have to say that, okay, the team is actually agile. So the bigger the organization, the bigger the task it becomes for it to train them. Even after you have trained them, you would never get to assess that are they doing good. But in this case, they did not have such a big team, so the coaching actually worked for them. And accordingly, again, here they used a mix of Scrum and Kanban instead of just going by one. They actually understood what vertical serves best for which methodology, and they took that. And the whole team emphasized collaboration. There was a lot of there were improved automation, as in just not automation for the sake of it, but the automation that can actually produce value. There were regular assessments that help them know that if they are leading into a successful agile transformation or not. And this was all assisted by Agile Sparks. Agile Sparks is a consulting company that offers customized agile transformation solution. So that is what supported them. So this is the opportunity that we are talking about that currently is being supplemented by folks like Agile Sparks for helping a company be agile. So eventually when it actually turned into agile, where it was delivering on one task or application per month, then they turned to 10 per quarter. That is around about 2.3, 2.5 per month. The quality improved. There was a shift in organizational mindset. There was increased team satisfaction. There was a better collaboration, and there was overall improvement in product quality. I could have actually quoted them on their revenue, but I could not find the figures. So, but in general, the agile transformation for this gaming embedding company has been far more fruitful who are struggling in its current shape and form. So this was about my research. I'm ready to take any questions.
You've done an excellent job. This is very thorough. I think these links to the capability maturity model that I put in the chat box might help you see what other work has been done in the same space, not necessarily specific to Agile, but certainly in the realm of project management. So I was at Motorola when I did the assessments for CMMI. Initially, we were targeting level 2 and then level 3. Meanwhile, we were building organizations in India and Bangalore that were level 5. So then we had this issue of how do you get level 3 and level 5 organizations to work together, because they're effectively on different planets, not just 5,000 miles away, but operating in a different MO, operating with a different mindset. So we had a lot of challenges, and it took many years to traverse this process. But the beauty back then, and I don't know if we have any companies that have the patience to do what we did in the 90s, but we had a commitment from senior management that was consistent and applied and expensive. Upwards of 10% of our resources were allocated to defining and implementing a standardized process. So originally it was waterfall and later became agile. But the bottom line is I don't see companies today having that kind of patience. I don't see companies today doing anything except literally like tearing the place apart and putting it back together on a daily basis. So an example would be Twitter, maybe an extreme example where they've gone and cut 80% of their headcount, right? Yet they still operate the same basic systems that they've operated before. And you could argue, well, they've been successful at automation, maybe. You could say that this is Gen AI at work. You could say that a lot of things, I suppose. but the truth is, this is going to add further strain to organizations that are already strained, right? So how can you be agile when the management is basically taking a meat cleaver to the place, right?
Right. I think very fairly said so, because when you talk about capabilities within an organization for them to absorb an adoption for agile, you actually have to look at the systems that they already have and the systems that they can introduce within their existing system, along with the people that work on those systems. So addressing both and understanding those in terms of the metrics that these assessment tools can offer can actually produce a lot of value where you can invest next and be better than you were before.
So I would ask maybe two or three things. One is send me a copy of this video, and with your permission, I'd like to post it on YouTube. Secondly, I would like you to take a look at the CMM, materials to see if there's any linkage to what you've done, and maybe create some updates. Thirdly, Janice Mejia is teaching a class in process reengineering. I think her class could benefit from your talk on this topic. Could I give her your name, and maybe you can?
Absolutely, please go ahead.
Could you compress this to 20 minutes instead of 60?
Yeah, I was elaborate about it with you, of course, but I can.
But if you can compress it to 20 and keep the students, you know who the students are, they're all MEM students, but I think this would be very applicable, because this is, transformation, which is what she's talking about. So
right.
I think
So is it Janice?
Janice Mejia, MEJIA. It's MEM 416, Business Process Reengineering.
Okay, cool.
She's teaching it this quarter, so we're going to have to move quickly, because the quarter is quickly, as you know, coming to an end. So
if you want to just shoot an email and loop me in, I'm okay. We can schedule some time.
I'll set it up. I'll send it out today.
Sure.
Last request. This is, I think, well enough researched and well enough done that you might want to consider getting it published. I think the IEEE EMR would be a great place to publish this. I put a link in the chat for that.
I have it, yes.
And then, let me know when it gets published. We can celebrate it in our LinkedIn page. But other than that, look, you've done a great job. It was well worth the wait. Hopefully you got something out of it. And maybe you shared something with your friends at Motorola. I don't know, right?
Oh, I've been trying to sell this to them, but they're very, 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 how should I put it? The kind of metrics they are very afraid to see. How are they? And it's going to be a leadership challenge. So you need leadership will when you want to do something like this.
Well, the irony is the very same organization that you're trying to assess was the very same organization that I helped put Agile in to begin with. And I think we documented 14 Agile practices, of which we chose to adopt 7 or 8, including pairs programming, where it was very controversial, right? Having code reviews that were peer code reviews, things of that nature that had never really been done before, right?
And I've always heard Motorola was the gold standard when it comes to engineering practices. 98, I'm talking about.
We were it was me who was pushing it, at least for the 1990s. So we had the best documented processes. While you were there, if you looked in their library, which we at the time called Compass, I don't know if you had a Compass access.
I have not come across this as yet.
Compass was our library of all of our standards and processes and practices, and many of those documents had my name on it. So at least back in the 90s, I don't know what they've done since, but it takes management's commitment to stay focused on this kind of thing over a long period of time. This is not going to be done overnight. This is not something you can even do in a year or two, right?
Yeah, I agree.
It takes a long time.
Even if we have this tool in place, it's not a magic.
No, there's no magic. There's no magic bullet. And I'm afraid now today, Gen AI is becoming the new magic bullet.
Yeah.
And I worry that this magic bullet of Gen AI is going to do a lot of destruction to the work we did, because people are going to just say, well, I can push a button and get code. What do we need a team of people for? So they'll go from 80 people to 10. And the 10 people are pushing buttons, hoping that AI generates all this stuff. And it's going to be, I think it's going to be a mess. But I don't know.
I mean, that's a very crucial point that you mentioned, because that just gave me a thought as to actually how it would come for the suitability of systems within the assessment.
And how to
So
integrate, how to integrate with automation would be the
yeah,
next
yeah,
logical discussion here. But listen, I don't want to take up any more of your time. You've done a great job. I want to
you,
thank
Professor.
you for doing this. I will review your final paper,
Yeah, great.
which I assume will be submitted on Canvas, and then we can I'll submit a grade, and you'll be set for the quarter.
Sure. So by when do you expect I submit? So I have all the data that I have, just I need to
Can we get everything in-house or submitted in Canvas by the 29th of November
okay, sounds good.
or sooner? But obviously the 29th is as late as I can go.
Yeah, I'll try to do before that, but thank you for that date because I can accommodate other stuff as well.
And you can look at the CMM stuff to see if anything there is applicable. So
So I can include that in my final report if I have to,
that'd be
right?
great. That'd be great.
Yeah.
You got about 3 weeks, a little more than 3 weeks. So,
Yeah.
all right, take care. I got to run.
Thank you, Professor. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Take care. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.